fellow constitutional warriors. In this video, I want to talk to you about a thinkprogress.org article by Ian Millhiser, and it's titled "Republican Judge Uses Utterly Ridiculous Logic to Uphold Voter Suppression." This was posted on the 11th of this month. And this is all surrounding the Alabama judge upholding the Alabama voter ID law. And you've heard me rail against groups like Think Progress and Let America Vote and Indivisible Guide and Common Cause when they talk about voter ID and how it's suppressive, which it isn't, and how they lie about it to convince people that it is suppressive, and when it actually isn't. And the line I want to dig into on this one here in particular, let me get over here, make sure I got it on my Firefox. Yes, I do. There's no such thing as a magical unicorn that trots into polling places and casts illegal votes. Unicorns are not real. Okay? Nonetheless, under the logic of a federal judge's decision in Greater Birmingham Ministries versus Merrill, the state of Alabama may lock many legitimate voters out of the polls, disproportionately targeting young people, low-income voters, and people of color in the process to prevent mythical creatures that don't actually exist from committing voter fraud. Now, this is right out of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, which I have in PDF form if you want it. Accuse your opponents of something that you're doing yourself. Now, Think Progress and all these groups I just mentioned, and especially Mr. Millhiser here, Ian Millhiser, believe that voter fraud is just a mythical unicorn that doesn't actually exist. And if you've been a follower of my videos and my podcast for a while, even years, I talked about some of this way back when I was just a podcast. I went and dug out articles out of my archives, and I archive every article I save. What I do, and this is just a little simple note for folks, what I do is I copy the articles down off the internet onto a Word document or an open office writer, I should say, document, because that's what I use, and I save it to my hard drive, and I save it in the shows and everything. Well, I went back and did a search of all my records and all my shows and that of voter fraud, and this is what I came up with. And I'll share that just in a second. But I did this research a while ago. These are solid articles that I put forth, and I just want to share these. I guess I'll share them with you now. 41 states revolt against Trump voter fraud probe. There was 41 states out there that would not give the voter fraud commission any information on its voters whatsoever. Okay, so President Trump had no recourse but to shut that commission down, but according to Daily Wire, turn the investigation over to the Department of Homeland Security because voter fraud does have something to do with securing the United States. As evidence of election fraud emerges, the media wants to keep you in the dark. These are just titles, folks. Democrats keep lying about voter suppression. These 5 facts show it isn't happening as far as voter suppression, folks. Massive voter fraud discovered in Pennsylvania. See huge tweet or twist into results. USA Politics today. New report exposes thousands of illegal votes in 2016 election. The problem of duplicate voting in 2017. America, the vulnerable. The problem of duplicate voting. The zombie voter apocalypse in California refused to admit its voter fraud problem. Voter fraud, it's a Heritage Foundation paper, and there's also a PDF that goes with that. And yep, there's voter fraud. Here it is from Democrats. Now, I want to get back to the zombie one here, because what Ian's saying in this article, that voter fraud, in-person voter fraud, doesn't exist. Yet in Chicago, Illinois, and now out in California, they've had dead people that have been voting for years and years and years. Somebody's voting for them. Somebody is casting their votes, whether they're coming right into the booth and doing it in person or somebody behind the scenes is doing it. But voter fraud is happening in the United States. Okay? Greater Birmingham Ministries involves Alabama's voter ID law, a common method of voter suppression often favored by conservative lawmakers because such laws have greater impact on groups that tend to prefer Democrats over Republicans. Voter ID proponents often justify these laws because they claim voter ID policies are necessary to prevent voter impersonation at the polls, but study after study has shown that this kind of fraud is virtually non-existent. Project Veritas, you can go back and search their videos. They did a sting on a couple different poll booths around, or polling places or precincts around Washington, D.C., and had very famous names attached to them, and they allowed them to vote. You go watch that. I didn't do the research on this. I just know that those videos are out there. And they go on to talk about these investigations and stuff like that. But the problem with making a blanket statement like that is most of the studies, and folks, I went down through, and every one of these links in this Think Progress story links to, guess what? Another Think Progress story. I don't like that. I don't use, if I see that in articles too many times, I disregard the article as accurate. And they're just citing sources. Huffington Post is famous for doing this. Think Progress is famous for doing this. And so the only reason why I am bringing this up to you is folks in these groups like Indivisible Guide, Common Cause, Let America Vote, Ian Millhiser here, Think Progress, because they published this, they must believe this. They assume that there's no voter fraud going on whatsoever, and they call it in-person voting fraud. And someone had to cast these ballots. I'm sorry. Someone had to do these zombie ballots. The two-person, two different people in the different states. One of the biggest arguments that have been addressed to me about this, well, two people can have similar names or the exact same name in two different states. And the statistical analysis of that means it says it's impossible. My name, I have a full 3 names, I have a full birth date, and I've lived in several states, but I'm registered here in Pennsylvania. In my home where I live, we have a little voting precinct there that covers a pretty good sized area, and the chances of someone else having the exact same name, the exact same birth date as I am, living in another state at the same time I'm living in Pennsylvania are nigh impossible. The number is so big it's hardly calculable. And yet they want to go with that narrative. And it's a big problem. Like I said, I have these articles. All these links will be up in the show notes in the bottom of the video today. All these links to these articles that I've shared with you in the past. So again, I think Progress and Ian Millhiser is the one that believes in unicorns if they think that there's no voter fraud going on whatsoever. They're the ones that believe in voter fraud. And I tell you what, folks, it amazes me. It honestly, folks, amazes me how these people can even look people straight in the eye and say, oh, there's no such thing as voter fraud out there, and voter ID just goes to suppress. Now, real quick here on the Alabama voter ID, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I've talked about it before. If you go to the Secretary of State's website and look it up, they not only have passed the voter ID law, they said if you can't afford one, if you're too poor to buy one, the good citizens of Alabama will pay for it for you. Yes, they did close down some DMVs in some poorer areas, but the DMVs were actually not being used that much. They shut them down, but they also set up a couple mobile units that they would go to these places. So again, I'm just wondering where these people get their ideas from. And this is the big lie that they never give out to folks, that every state that I've researched that they said is the voter ID is suppressive, every state offers free IDs if you can't afford them, and they also Well, it's mainly just the free IDs. And I've said this before, and I know there's other people in other districts or other areas that probably do the same thing I'm doing. If you live in the sound of my voice as far as around Sunbury, PA, and you need a ride to get, or even help to go online, if you don't have a driver's license, you need an ID to vote, I'll help you go online and get the application. And then if you need a ride, I'll take you down to the local DMV to get your picture taken. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. So these regressive groups out there just lie and lie and lie again. And it amazes me how these people get up in the morning without lying, without, I don't know how they look themselves in the face with all the lies they actually perpetrate. And they actually believe these lies. I'm Dan Clemens, your host of the Dan Clemens Show. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you in the next video.